Looks like we have a lot of people, so I think we should just get started. So, hello everyone. Welcome to another Girls Who Start Zoom chat. I'm so thrilled to have all of you here today. The Girls Who Start mission is to inspire middle school, high school, and college girls to become entrepreneurs and leaders. We hope to achieve this mission by showcasing female leaders and sharing their stories. We have almost 40 chapters in middle schools, high schools, and colleges throughout the country, as well as internationally. If you're interested in starting a chapter or you know someone who may be interested, please feel free to reach out through the Girls Who Start website and Instagram, which I will place in the chat momentarily. First, I would just like to thank you all for joining us today. I am beyond thrilled and honored to be introducing our speaker, Karen Flavelle, the CEO and president of Purdy's Chocolatier. In 1994, she joined the company as the executive vice president, and within 3 years assumed her father's role as the president of Purdy's. However, I felt that I should recognize that Karen was not initially invited to join the family business. Karen's father, Charles Flavelle, who bought Purdy's in 1963, did not believe in promoting family members into positions above long-term employees. Inspiring Karen to forge her own way to business success, she went on to study at Queen's University, and after developing an extensive marketing and retail knowledge through successful corporate careers, Karen purchased Purdy's from her father in 1997. Under her leadership, Purdy's has grown from 42 to over 80 locations across Canada and has been named an Aon Best Employer 9 times. In 2005, Karen was named the most influential woman in business and has been recognized as one of Canada's most powerful women. Additionally, in more recent years, Karen was awarded a Top CEO Award by Glassdoor. With a focus on community, sustainability, and tradition, Karen has unquestionably transformed Purdy's into Canada's top chocolatier. We are so honored to have her joining us today. So I am going to be asking Karen some questions, and then I'll open it up to the group for a Q&A. Finally, I just wanted to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. So hi, Karen. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm thrilled to be here. I was so impressed to hear that there was an organization like this that even existed, which is really exciting because it makes me hopeful that there will be a more equal number of women business leaders in the future. And even more than that, as kind of the number of men leaders and women leaders starts to balance, then we're going to see an evolution of how things are done that are kind of more reflective of the way women might lead things and not just the traditional way of how men have led things. So all of you are creating a really exciting future.
Thank you. We're so glad that, that's our main mission. So my first question for you today, having come from an entrepreneurial background with your father having been the president of Purdy's, how did your childhood influence your journey to becoming who you are today? Did you always have an ambition to someday take over Purdy's as the president, or rather pave your own entrepreneurial path?
So as you mentioned, Dad was pretty clear that none of the four of us were welcome at Purdy's. And he actually didn't mean to do that. More what he was trying to say is, my employees are really important and valuable. And so he was more speaking to his care and love for his employees than he was against us, but that was the result. And the other thing he said was, I'm putting whatever profit we can muster back into the business. And so I didn't know much about finance or anything else. And so I just figured, well, then that means you're not saving any money. So you have to sell the business in order to have anything for retirement. It baffled me how you could live for 25 years without an income. Like, how can you possibly save enough to be able to do that? And so, so it seemed pretty clear to me that I needed to find my own path. And I don't think I was really thinking entrepreneurially or not, but I probably was more lucky than I realized to have watched my father do it, because it wasn't such a foreign thing to me. And as a student, I went to Point Grey High School. I was on the student council, on the grass hockey team, the track team. I liked being involved in things. And I also loved languages. I was lucky enough to go and live with a family in France after grade 8, between grade 8 and grade 9, and loved the ability to speak another language. So I started taking Spanish and German. And then I went to university thinking that I would do international business. And so I'd do a language degree first and then follow it up with an MBA. But within 2 months, I realized I like speaking languages. They're like the key to another culture, but I don't like studying literature. And so I transferred into business in the first term of my first year and didn't look back. That was the best decision ever. And thank goodness I could.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think as we're heading to university, we're all thinking about what we should take, whether we should go into business or study something else. So yeah, I think a lot of the girls here are planning to take business.
Right.
That's great. So my next question is, despite your father being the president of Purdy's, as you've mentioned or touched a little bit on in the previous question, he did hold a firm stand in not promoting family members past long-term employees. So I understand that it took some convincing, I believe 2 or 3 times, before he finally allowed you to join Purdy's. So could you tell us a little bit about why you were so determined in joining the company? What really convinced your father in selling it to you? And we'd be keen on knowing, after seeing the direction you have taken Purdy's, what your father's stance is today.
So it never really felt like convincing because I just sort of went off to Queens, and then at Queens I got really interested in marketing, packaged goods marketing, and um, but after, or in fourth year, third and fourth year, I I wanted to do something different, and before I kind of settled into this career that was probably going to be the rest of my life. And so I got fascinated with Japan and decided to go to Japan for a year and a quarter, and then spent the rest of that year traveling through Asia, or the rest of that 2 years. So I learned to speak conversational Japanese, which is just, it's a beautiful language, but it's more challenging than European languages because there's no visual reinforcement of what you're learning. When you learn French, you can see it written in an alphabet that we're familiar with. When you're learning Japanese, you don't have a visual kind of anchor to go with the audio. But anyway, and then when I came back to Canada, I started my career in packaged goods in Toronto at General Mills. So General Mills is Cheerios and Betty Crocker, Nature Valley, fruit roll-ups, and a great training ground for marketers. But after a while, I don't know whether I got bored of Toronto or bored of General Mills, but I thought, oh, maybe I should get a marketing job back in Vancouver. So I got myself an interview at McGavin's Bread, and they flew me out, I guess, for the more final interviews. And when they did that, I thought, oh, well, maybe I should ask Dad if I can join Purdy's. And it was kind of as flippant as that. So I hadn't really thought a lot about it. And he said, no, no, we don't need you at Purdy's. And I'm sure what was going through his head was, well, we already have a marketing person. So am I supposed to fire that person in order for my daughter to join? That's not good. And so that was fine, because what I ended up doing, I didn't join McGavin's. I didn't move to Vancouver at that point. I moved to London, England instead by the end of that year. And that was just an amazing year. I worked for a little boutique consulting company. I was actually trying to move from packaged goods to retail. So I interviewed with retail companies like Boots in London, but all they could think of that a marketer might do is purchasing. And purchasing is not what I wanted to do. So I ended up at a marketing consulting boutique for the year. And I learned, actually, I'm not a consultant. I'm an operator. I like solving the problems. I like seeing the problems through to conclusion. I'm not someone that likes kind of telling other people what they should do. So, so then actually there was a crash of 87. It was one of the deep recessions. And so my husband, who was in the finance world, decided good time to come back to Canada. And so I started looking at what am I good at? There's a book called What Color's Your Parachute? I'm not sure if it's still out, but it kind of talks you through, what are you good at? What are you not good at? What do you love? What do you gravitate to? What do you gravitate away from? And lo and behold, a medium-sized retail company emerged off the page. So now I was more thoughtful about why I thought I might be good at it. And I went back to my father. And he was more ready this time for two reasons. I'm one of four. I'm the eldest of four children. And my youngest brother was killed in a mountain climbing accident a few years prior to that. And so it made my father realize he actually wasn't going to be there forever, and maybe he should think about next steps. And then the second thing that happened is one of those long-term employees, in fact, his very first employee, came to him one day and said, "So when's the family coming into the business?" And I guess that got him thinking that if family didn't come into the business, then he might have to sell Purdy's, and that would be worse, way worse. So he was more receptive, and I actually was more thoughtful about why I wanted to. But my husband had been in England for 5.5 years. His family was from Toronto, and he wanted to spend at least 5 years in Toronto, kind of reconnecting with them before we moved to Vancouver. And so that gave Dad and I 5 years to negotiate, which was perfect. It was, I think it was a blessing that we were not in the same city, because if we had been in the same city, it would have been easy for me to just kind of start without either of us having thought about things that we needed to think about. And so some of the things that I was clear about, I was clear about what I didn't want. And I didn't want my siblings, who had no interest in business or living in Vancouver or any of that, to be co-owners with me. I wanted to be owning it on my own. I wanted clarity around how long it would take before I was president. And some of the early discussions, my father saw me starting kind of pretty much in the mailroom, or on the factory floor. And I would say, well, so if John Smith from Toronto was going to come and buy your business, do you think you would have them start on the factory floor? And just trying to shift his perspective. Um, and then the other thing was voting control. So at what point, how much of the company would I buy before I had control? And of course, I thought it should be at 55%. So as soon as I owned more of it than he did, then I should have voting control. He didn't agree. He thought 75%. And so that's what we did. And I think really that's fair, because he was still relying on me to make sure I paid him the rest of it. So yeah.
That's an amazing story. Well, I mean, we've seen the success of Purdy's with you as the president. So it's great that you got to join the company and that the company has grown because of you. So my second question for you is, after assuming the role of president in 1997, you took a very progressive approach that reflected its times and launched the Purdy's website. In addition to this, you made tremendous efforts in the rebranding and expanding of the company, taking it from 42 to over 80 locations across Canada. Could you tell us a little bit more about the time when you had just joined the company? What aspects did you think were important to implement, or what ideas were you excited to bring about? And with your establishing of the Purdy's website, I think we'd all be curious to know the importance of tracking retail trends and having foresight in the market.
So the very first thing was just listening to customers. And by that, really also listening to employees. So it was really important to me to spend a lot of time in the stores and understand how they worked, who the staff were, and in our case, how the seasons worked. So I spent one day in each store, and that took about 4 months. But it just filled me with all kinds of ideas. And so for Purdy's, the most important thing really are the seasons. And there's 3 big seasons and then a whole lot of little seasons. So the big seasons are Christmas, Valentine's, and Easter. And the little seasons are Halloween, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Thank You Teacher, Diwali, Vaisakhi, Hanukkah, Lunar New Year, that kind of thing. So I spent, so all that time I could see opportunities, things that we didn't have that we should have, things, how to merchandise. I learned from other retailers in the malls as well. So one of the first things was we didn't have a strong cohesive brand representation. And I was impressed with the Body Shop, who at the time had a very cohesive dark green kind of store. And you didn't even need to see the logo on the door. You could tell out of the corner of your eye you were passing a Body Shop because of that green. And so that's what I wanted for Purdy's, but of course with purple, because purple has always been our color, but we weren't using it well at all back then. And then I started to recognize we didn't have a good costing system, and I insisted that we get to know what each product cost us so that we were then pricing it properly. I was hearing from customers that they'd like something about $10. Do you have anything for about $10? And at the time we really didn't, because we were pricing everything by the pound. And so it's kind of whatever the price ended up being because of the weight, as opposed to saying, what do the customers want? Oh, they want something about $10. So then from that, we started making sure that each season thought of every price point that someone might want. So you might have children who want something for under $10, or people that are buying multiples, so they want it under $10. And then people that wanted $15, $20 items, and then businesses that want business gifts. So what are all the things at Easter and Valentine's and Easter that we need to have, and being more thoughtful about what the lineup was. One example was Valentine's had been declining for about the last 4 years, and the kind of signature little heart was about $17. And what I was hearing people say was, I want something for about $10, and my wife will kill me if I get her too much chocolate. So clearly what was important about the heart box wasn't so much the chocolate inside it, it was the thought. And so we sourced our boxes from a different place. We changed the packaging and put in a tray so it actually had less chocolate, but then we could also get to the price point as well. So the wife didn't want a lot of chocolate, but also the price point. So that year, Valentine's went up 17%. So it was huge, huge difference. And it's just from listening to customers. Another one was think purple. So like I said, capturing that idea from Body Shop, but then how do you get everybody making decisions so that you end up looking more purple? And our slogan was think purple, which meant it needs to be purple. Whatever it was needs to be purple unless you have a good reason why not. So if you're going off to buy a stapler, it should be a purple stapler for the store. If you're buying what do you call it, cloth for a table, because in those days there might be a table in the mall where we had things for sale, that needed to be purple, not pink, not red, purple. And so gradually, you know, the purchasing team and the merchandising team and the marketing team, who were all making decisions about what ended up in the store, were making purple decisions. And the last one was value for the customer, value for Purdy's, because what I noticed was staff were so wanting to help customers, but they were losing sight of what they were giving away. And it's kind of like, well, there's a balance between what the customer wants, but also what Purdy's wants to sell. And so it needs to make sense for Purdy's as well. So it started to shift the thinking. So we were an early adopter of the internet. It may seem hard to believe now, but there was all kinds of consultants that were saying stores are dead. There's never going to be any more stores. You need to join our internet mall. And some thinking is interesting because it gets stuck in history. And of course, the history was we go to malls. So therefore, the digital representation should be, we'll also go to malls. And I suppose in a way that is what Amazon is, given the breadth of stuff it has. But at the time, the idea was that Purdy's and Aritzia and Lululemon, we would all be in a digital mall, which of course that has not happened. Um, so the goal when we first started the internet, which I think would have been around 2000, was for it to be as big as one store. And we probably had 50 or 55 stores at the time. So that that wasn't a lofty goal at all. And it was slow to take off because our target audience is about 41 years old. It's people who probably have got married, had kids, they're nesting, they're creating family traditions, they're giving gifts to teachers and business colleagues or work colleagues. And so they weren't thinking of either buying food online or Purdy's online specifically. Because when I'd hear friends say, "Oh, I didn't know Purdy's was online," and I'd ask them why that surprised them, they would say, "Well, I like going in and seeing them in the box." So there was this whole physical thing that seemed to need to happen. But COVID has really helped us in that respect, because COVID started about 2 weeks before Easter. Easter is our second biggest season. We do over 50% of our sales in about 10 weeks. So a huge amount of sales in a very short time. Sorry, that's not of only Easter, that's all the three main peaks altogether, but it just speaks to, we don't have an even even sales through the year. And so to lose Easter was devastating. But ecom went up 600% during Easter. So it helped put ecom on the map. And that, so we haven't stayed at 600%. We're down now about 40% growth, but that's still much healthier growth than we had before. And it's also off a higher base, which just means we're learning to do things better, like fulfillment. Our costs in fulfillment were just ridiculous because we weren't managing how many transactions per hour should be fulfilled. And so COVID gave us that opportunity. So as awful as COVID is, and I don't know if you've had other speakers, but I think most of us have found there are some COVID blessings along the way. So tracking trends, I mean, trends, we've tracked trends forever. They come from all different places, and they're manifested in all different places with us. So obviously one of the first is chocolate recipe development. And probably, I mean, I'm thinking probably one of the trends that was interesting was the savory trend. So raspberry balsamic, dark chocolate truffle, or goat cheese Chardonnay, kind of the blend of savory with, and matcha. And matcha is not only sort of savory, but also Asian fusion. And I think we've been working on a black sesame for a while, but it's not quite ready for launch yet. And then there's packaging and presentation, which has its own set of trends. So years ago, I remember kind of coming into the business, and it was purple boxes and gold boxes. And then it went to raffia and craft paper. And then it swung back to gold and glitz and shiny. And now we're back to craft paper and raffia, I think, again. So that changes. And then sustainability of materials, of course. So we're working to have more and more sustainable packaging. Our vegan and advent calendar, both last year when was its first year, it's in highly like there's no gold embossing, and I think it can be, of course, it can be recycled. I think it's made of recycled paper as well. And then lastly, the other trend is understanding shifting communities and customers. So, demographics get younger, demographics shift. And so, for example, a number of communities have kind of overarching characteristics, like the South Asian population tends to like very sweet things. Chinese populations tend to like not sweet things. So a store in Richmond compared to Guildford in Surrey is going to sell the same things, but in much different quantities. And then we're trying to think about, okay, so what do customers want for Persian New Year? What do people want for Diwali, for Hanukkah, and all of those. Um, what you might not know is we have more than e-com and stores. We also have seasonal group, which is where groups of business people, school or hospital, anywhere where there's a group of people get together and make a large purchase, and then it's sent directly to their school, and there's a 25% discount. And then there's a mirror image of that program for fundraising, which is groups in a school get together. Maybe some of you have done it, I don't know. And the 25% goes to the soccer team or the band or that kind of thing. And then we have year-round fundraising. So recently, this fall, we did research into each of those channels because they're actually people looking for quite different purposes. And so learning how to speak to each one of them. And so, for example, we used to just call up with a standard fundraising pitch of, you can make money with Purdy's fundraising. And now we've learned, oh, you're a dance company. So, we've worked with a number of other dance companies, and this is what they found helpful. And so better targeted to who our customer is. In terms of digital analytics and social media, I really rely on other people for that. But it's core to what we're doing. Most of our awareness building these days is through social media, and then understanding our customer. We do a lot of A/B testing with emails. So, you send out maybe the same product, but with 2 different messages, and then see what response rate you get from each one and all that kind of thing.
Perfect.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know that there were so many steps to all of this, but it's cool to hear. So my next question is, Purdy's has been awarded with the Aon Best Employer Award 9 times, and in 2019 you were elected a top CEO by Glassdoor. First, I just want to commend you in establishing such an amazing environment amongst your workforce. It certainly is not an easy task. And I think we'd all be curious in what you believe are the main attributes of a successful leader. And what is some advice you can give to us in building a team or finding the right employees to help achieve your company's ambitions?
So the first is really kind of the same thing as I said before about customers, except about employees. So listen, be curious, hear what customers and employees are telling you. Don't be defensive, because especially in a company with a long history, it's easy to go, oh, well, yeah, but we do it this way because. And so keeping your ears open and trying to digest the new thoughts. The second thing would be creating accountability in your organization. So using SMART goals, and I mean, this applies to student council or any projects that you're working on right now. And SMART goals, if you haven't heard of them, are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, timely goals. So instead of saying, oh, I think we can get a lot of sales, it's like, okay, we're going to get $10,000 of sales over this 2-week, that's the timely part, 2-week period, by doing this kind of sales method, and then holding people to those commitments. And then when things go sideways, we just finished a really great training at Purdy's called Accountability and Personal Accountability. And the 3 basic steps are: don't blame, look in the mirror, engineer the solution. So instead of saying, you really messed up, it's kind of like, hang on a second, did I actually tell you what to do very well? Maybe part of what happened there is I wasn't clear with you. And then more often than not, it's actually because the system needs to be changed. So all I can think of is a silly personal kind of example of like, I hate it when my brother comes into my room without knocking. So the solution is knock on the door before you come in and ask to come in. So that's engineering a solution. And then, of course, finding the right people, because sometimes it can be tempting to hire someone. They're the best of the lot, so they're not actually what you want, but they're the best that you could find. And so, really, as disappointing as it is, you should go back to the well and not just the best of that lot. Um, yeah, so and it's hard making judgments on people, and finding those awesome people, but that's absolutely critical.
That's great. That's some great advice that we hope to implement when building teams or being leaders, and whether it be a club or the student council or anything like that. So
Yeah.
that's great. So my next question is, Purdy's is a huge advocate for sustainability. Your chocolates are made with 100% sustainable cocoa sourced from Ecuador, Peru, the Ivory Coast, and Ghana. In commemoration of your 100th anniversary, you launched an initiative supporting cocoa farmers in Africa and South America. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Sustainable Cocoa Program and the Clean Water Project? And why do you think it's important for large corporations to be involved in a larger global aspect?
Well, just to start with the last one first, it's really important for larger companies. I mean, we would consider ourselves medium sized, um, not large, but we're large within our category, as a retailer. And I mean, it's kind of a symbiotic relationship between customers and companies. Is we take a stance, customers are looking for it, and together we kind of do better and better for the world in general. And so we're leading the way in better ways of doing things. Um, so yeah, we felt it was really important to give back to cocoa growing communities in 2007, but we'd actually already started contributing to the World Cocoa Foundation prior to that. So it's been about well over 14 years. And and then the sustainable cocoa is pretty exciting, because the whole goal is to pay a premium to support farmer partners to help improve their livelihoods. And there's two pillars to that. One is sustainable farms, and that's around improving cocoa yields, providing higher incomes. And there's two ways to improve cocoa yields. One is quantity of beans, and the other is quality of beans. So they get a better price if the bean is a better quality, and of course they get more dollars if there's more beans. And so it's things like improved agricultural product practices, pruning the trees. Some of them, I remember walking in Ghana, and we were on the border of two farms, and one farm was pruning and the other wasn't. And the one that wasn't had kind of shriveled dark cocoa pods, and the one that was pruning was healthy. And so it's just spreading that education so that everybody can benefit. Another one is burning the diseased pods, because the farmers would just leave them at the bottom of the tree, and then the disease would continue. Instead, education to take the pods away from the trees and burn them. And then fermenting. So one of the first steps with cocoa beans is fermenting. So the farmer cuts the pod off the tree, and then cracks it open a bit like an egg. They don't cut them open because they don't want to cut any of the beans. And then they pile them on banana leaves so that they can ferment. And so they leave them in a pile. And when you go back after 2 or 3 days, it's warm like a bath inside, because that fermentation is happening. And but then you want to mix them, because of course the ones in the middle are getting a different level of fermentation than the ones on the periphery. So that's, I mean, all of these are simple, easy to do techniques. They're not out of the ability of the farmers. And then drying is the next step, which is also done on the farms. So better drying, and yeah, some equipment for that too, like just a rain shelter. Then the second part of sustainable farms is business education, which is literacy and numeracy. So being able to count and read. And then also promotion of women in business and community roles. So providing loans for women to maybe buy a couple of chickens so that they can then have eggs and then they can pay off the chickens. I mean, my ideal is where it continues to cycle through the community. So you give one woman the loan for the chicken, she gets enough eggs, she can pay off the chickens, then that money can go to the next person, and it just perpetuates through the community. And lastly, environmental sustainability. So soil management, waterway protection, biodiversity and habitat preservation. One of the challenges is cocoa farms have crept into the parks in the Ivory Coast. And so companies like us and World Cocoa Foundation are trying to encourage the government of the Ivory Coast to be stricter. And part of it's corruption. You know, the park officials are bribed to turn a blind eye to cocoa farms that are creeping into the parks. And so trying to stop that, trying to stop cutting down the forest for cocoa farming in places where it's not meant to be. And then the second pillar is sustainable living. So that's medical care. A lot of people in villages, well, actually, so a key thing to understand is there's about 1 million cocoa farmers in the Ivory Coast. And to give you an idea, in Canada, there's something like 25,000 farmers. So there's a whole lot more farmers in little tiny villages up dirt roads that are washed out when the rains come. And so going to the hospital or going to get medical attention is really super difficult. And people, especially women, because they want to go to the doctor and their husband says, what do you mean? Who's going to cook? Who's going to do all the stuff? Don't want you going over to the medical clinic that's going to take you a day to walk to and get back. So, so there's a mobile truck that can go to these villages and provide care, and vaccination programs and distribution of first aid kits. And then community infrastructure and education, building schools and teacher housing, a lending library, drilling boreholes for water and filtration units. And then you mentioned the Clean Water Project. That's a pretty amazing piece of equipment. It's about, I don't know, 4 feet tall, 4 feet tall and 2 or 3 feet wide. And it's, you pour water in the top that is dirty water, and out the bottom comes clean water. And it's made by a Swiss company, and they last. These filters just have to be cleaned, but then they can last for years, which is astounding to me. So we were able to, I think our target was 50, and we raised enough money to take 65. And I think each village needed about 5. So that meant we could give these filters to a lot of different villages. And actually, I went with one of our people to give these filters to about 5 of the villages. And the organization that we worked through did a fantastic job, because what they did is they gave 1 filter to each of the villages, and then said, okay, we're happy to give you more, but you need to do some education. And you need to teach people why this filter is important, because they weren't necessarily linking water with disease or water with stomach troubles or diarrhea or things like that. And so they did teach the kids in school, etc. And when I was there, the person said to this group of kids that was clamoring around, so why do we use the filter? And so Ivory Coast is a French-speaking place. I'd say, à cause des microbes, because of the microbes. So it's like, oh yay, they're understanding, and that means they'll look after it, they'll use it, and they'll hopefully be healthier. And then the last one is child wellness and development. So 0 tolerance for forced labor or child labor, and then making education in schools accessible so that we can prevent child labor, and educating the kids on what child labor is so that they have some element of what's right and what's wrong.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you're going to these communities and you're giving back to them, and really implementing these things in other countries and other parts of the world. So Amazing job to you guys. So my last question for you today is, many of us are still in high school and college. So what skills do you think are important for us to develop right now? And what entrepreneurial advice would you share with us?
So, being an entrepreneur is really all about not letting hurdles get in your way. So, being resilient, being resourceful, finding a way. So, whenever you have a problem, because as an entrepreneur, you will have a ton of problems, and you'll probably have times when people are all saying, well, that's not going to work, that's not going to work, and you need to be confident and resilient enough to keep pushing, but also wise enough to know when to pivot and listen and do, which is a hard balance. um, Another thing would be building your network so that you have lots of people to go to when you need advice or help. And probably one of the best is an organization called the Forum. Used to be called Forum for Women's Entrepreneurs. And so it's a place where there's tremendous encouragement, mentoring, support for budding women entrepreneurs. And then the other would be joining, like when you get to that time and you're, say, in the food industry, or you're in the tech industry, is joining the industry organizations and meeting people through the industry organizations. Um, One of the things that's been super helpful to me is called the Young Presidents Organization. And as an entrepreneur, it's more challenging. I bought a business that existed, so it kind of leapfrogged me to a larger business faster. And that's something worth looking into too. Is how would you finance buying a business? So if you can, so here's a challenge for you and a lofty goal. If you can build your company to 20 million in sales before you're 45 years old, then you can join Young Presidents Organization. And it is tremendously helpful because a huge part of it is confidentiality. What you say to another YPO member doesn't get repeated unless you give permission for it to be repeated. And so it gives you a huge ability to ask ask advice about things maybe you're embarrassed about, like, why am I so bad at doing something, or how do I do something that I feel like I should know how to do but I don't, or how do I buy a building in Vancouver? I've never done that before. How does the real estate market work? How does PR for not good situations, how does that work, and who should I call and who can help me? um, so unfortunately, there's only, I don't know, about 10 women out of 100 of the YPO members. So again, this is why I'm so excited to be here today, is hopefully you all are going to dramatically change that so that it's an organization that's more balanced and not male, stale, and pale, as the president of a few years back said. So there's a lot more diversity now, but less diversity in gender. And lastly, I know you're not really thinking about this now, but in the future, think about the partner that you're going to share your life with. So are they supportive of what you want to accomplish, to the point that they're going to share in looking after the family and the house that you have together? And will each of you share in sacrificing the other's career to go forward at different points? What I didn't mention, when that 5 years when Dad and I were negotiating, and I was living in Toronto. By that point I was working at Swiss Chalet, so kind of retail but restaurants. My husband, who was an investment banker in industrial bonds, or institutional bonds, I should say, he was doing government finance, which was something he absolutely loved, but he wouldn't be able to do in Vancouver. And so in order for me to come to Vancouver meant he needed to move to the secondary market of bonds, which is more trading bonds, but not creating them through governments. And so I needed to make sure that it was worthwhile for he and I together as a couple move to Vancouver with the sacrifice that he was making. So I know that's a long time away, but it's a super important thing.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that with us. So um, now we are going to open it up to a Q&A. If you guys do have a question, please type your name in the chat and I'll call on you to share it. So that way you guys get to speak with Karen. If you don't feel comfortable speaking out loud, don't worry about it. Feel free to type your question in the chat and I can ask it for you. And finally, in the interest of time, we may not get to everyone's questions, but we will try our best. Thank you, Karen. All your responses were so insightful, and we're really excited to take everything you've said on board with us and into our future careers. So thanks a lot.
Well, I'd love it if some of you do end up starting businesses and either have questions at that point. I'm pretty easy to reach, or yeah, I'd love to hear how it's going.
So Layla, would you like to ask your question to Karen?
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to speak to you. I just have one question. So what were some challenges that you've experienced for your journey and how did you work through them?
So one of the challenges was when I got to Purdy's, we were really in every mall, every location that we wanted to be in BC and Alberta. So how to grow? And the obvious answer is expand, except it's not so obvious because North America was kind of divided in 4 quadrants, if you like. Purdy's was super successful in Western Canada. Laura Secord was dominant in Eastern Canada, but it was getting weaker. See's was dominant in Western US, and Fannie Mae was dominant in Eastern US, but also it had also gone sideways. And so going into Laura Secord territory, oh, and also I really felt that there was really only room for one chocolatier because in order for the volume to make sense to build stores and hire people and all that, it didn't seem to me that it could be shared. So the decision to expand into Ontario was super, super scary because we're a retailer. Like if you're a wholesaler, you just go and sell it to a few. I'm making it simple because I'm not a wholesaler, but you can sell into a few accounts, and if it's not going well, you just don't sell to those accounts anymore. But as a retailer, you have to build a store, and when you build a store, you sign a 10-year lease, and then as you build a chain of stores, you have some stores in this year, and then 2 next year, and then 3 the year after that, and 4 the year after that. And so then if you want to close them all, you either have to gradually wind down, which would be painful, or you would have to pay the landlords to let you out of your leases. And so it's kind of like just taking a flyer and hoping it would be okay, but it was very scary. And the second part of that expansion to Ontario was personal, because I really didn't need the company to be any bigger, to be honest. But I knew the company needed to grow, and I knew that to keep people happy and growing and being promoted, then the company has to keep growing. But what it meant for me was way more travel. And I started at Purdy's with 3 very small children, so that meant I was away more, and even to the point of it was nice after a while to go to Toronto. I didn't have to cook or think about food. Like, what meals do I need to make? And it got to the point where it's like, I can see how this can lead to divorce because it's so easy to be away and harder to be home yeah. But fortunately, I mean, Ontario is okay. Ontario is still not doing the levels that BC does. And we don't have the same kind of loyalty in Ontario that we do in BC. So we're still working hard at making that happen.
That's great. Thank you, Karen. So Sheila, if you'd like to go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Karen, for giving us the insights. My question is more related towards the current situation of Purdy's. I know that the pandemic has impacted especially the food industry, since people don't usually buy food online, and now that it's harder to actually go to physical stores, I'm sure like there are probably a lot of changes or like a lot of new initiatives or insights being gained from this new experience. So yeah, I'm wondering how was Purdy's able to gain new customers or make sure that like original customers are coming back during the pandemic time?
So the first was with ecom, and all of a sudden people had to have their Purdy's for Easter, and so they thought more about how else they might get it since the stores were closed. This is a year ago, and uh, and what we learned is our fulfillment was so bad. So how do you go and increase 600% with the same number of people? Oh, but by the way, they need to be socially distanced. And so it really shone us a light on getting better at fulfillment, which was fantastic. Um, then another interesting thing was our fundraising has really taken off. So even though you'd say, well, but the bands aren't going anywhere and people aren't playing soccer, it seemed like the schools still wanted to continue their practice, or the parent groups wanted to continue their practice of fundraising. And we started to realize that our fundraising actually is really great for people because not only is it easy to sell, but they don't have to take inventory. So one of the things with fundraising is if you have to, like with Girl Guide cookies, you need to buy X amount of Girl Guide cookies and then hope that your soccer team members can sell all the Girl Guide cookies. But meanwhile, you've made an obligation to buy all those cookies. And with our program, you don't have to buy it up front. So you don't have to take on that financial commitment of inventory. And then we did research to understand, like, how do these different customers use our system, which we hadn't done before. One of the other COVID blessings is my 27-year-old son joined us, and I had a family employment guideline that said he wasn't allowed to join us for another 7 years, because he had to go to university and had worked 10 years outside the business. But thank goodness COVID happened and he joined us. And one of the things he did was DoorDash. So DoorDash, I would say the DoorDash of, go online to order DoorDash, that doesn't work so well for us. But DoorDash actually has a whole back end system that we're now using for fast delivery in cities. And actually my son's girlfriend uses it all the time because her family lives in Winnipeg. So what else? It's been tough with all the ice cream closed, but ice cream's now opening up again. It was really tough with all the Ontario stores closed from Christmas until really just recently, just before Easter. And thank goodness we're a BC based company, because that really helped us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Because I'm thinking of starting like a food business during the summer, so that's why I wanted to know like if there are some things that I could do so that I could still manage in this pandemic situation. And yeah, I think your answer really helped. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I would say, people are at home making food. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in September. Like, are we all going to go, yeehaw, let's go to a restaurant? I haven't been to a restaurant for so long. Or what I'm hearing some friends who used to travel a huge amount say is, you know what? I don't feel like I need to travel quite so much. It's so beautiful here in BC. Why am I always going somewhere else? So maybe all the people that have been making sourdough bread and cooking during COVID will say, I think I'll just keep doing that.
That's perfect. So next, I think we'll go to Agueda.
Hi. Hi. Thank you so much for being here, Karen. I would like to know what your highlights were throughout your career.
You know, it's funny. Probably my favorite time was back at the beginning when the company was smaller, and I was more hands-on. And just there was a woman who had worked her way up to director of retail, and she and I just really got on well, and she made great things happen. So I think it was that earlier time with a smaller team that was my favorite. Now, one of the things I've had to learn over time is not to be in the weeds, not to be in the detail in the operations, but kind of set direction. And I actually like the solving of problems better, to be honest.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. So now we're going to head to Navia. So Navia, if you just want to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Karen. I would like
Hi.
to ask you, how does the chocolate industry compare to other food industries in your experience? And what are some things that you learned in business school that you're able to implement into your job as a CEO?
So we're different from, I guess the difference to me is more retail versus wholesale than chocolate versus other food. So because we're so different from Nestle and Mars, where they have, I don't know, 10 bars and fewer than that that are in the top 10, and they're sold in count lines, and they make millions and millions of them. Whereas we're making hundreds of different things, selling them all in our store. So I'm a huge advocate of retail. I think the wholesale business is tough. The grocers, part of the reason that I wanted to leave the grocery industry is as a food product selling into the grocery chains, there's only about 5 or 6 in Canada. And so it's kind of like an oligopoly where there's not a wide range. And actually I just had a walk with the founder of Bloom, who it's non-coffee or tea lattes that she makes. And she was talking about how challenging getting into the wholesale chain is. Whereas with retail, if your product works, you can create the whole environment that you want a customer to experience. And then I guess in answer to your question, there's the obvious, which is chocolate melts and chocolate blooms. It can't withstand humidity and it can't withstand heat, and so there's a lot of extra care that has to go into it. We have air conditioners in all of our stores, unlike most other retailers in the mall.
That's really interesting. I also wanted to ask, what did you learn in business school that you were able to implement into your job? No, don't worry about it. I asked 2 questions at once. Like, what did you learn that you were able to kind of use to your advantage when you first started out, or even use now?
Well, I guess because I was interested in marketing, that's the lessons I learned there. The early, I mean, it might all be different now, but at the time it was the 4 Ps: price, promotion, product, and place, and USP, unique selling proposition, and just I guess how to think strategically and solve and find the route that you can appeal to customers. Like you can cut through all the noise that customer is hearing from lots and lots of other products, even in the same category you want to be in, and what makes you stand out. I hated stats. And you would laugh at what computer courses we took at that time. And then finance and accounting were really not my thing at all. So maybe I say that to encourage you that maybe people think you're supposed to be good at math, finance, and accounting to be good at business. And actually you don't need to be. I'm living proof of that, because I'm more about what does the customer want. And you're all smart enough to have the basics of what you need, but you can always get help with the more complicated stuff.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So Gloria is asking, did you face any challenges as a female CEO in a male-dominated environment? And how did you overcome such difficulties? And what would you tell young women who plan to work in a male-dominated field?
I think I wasn't really in, I mean, it was male dominated, meaning at General Mills, all the senior people were men, but it wasn't male dominated like the finance industry or the construction industry or the mining industry. And I didn't really feel it much because according to my mother, I always gravitated to guys for conversation in high school even, and I'm pretty active. I road bike with a group of guys. I ski with about a group of guys. I like doing sports at the level of guys, and so that's who I hang out with for the most part. And I've actually had to teach myself, not teach myself, but I've had to recognize that I need female friends as well, and make more of an effort in that. So I think I probably noticed it less. But maybe one thing I would say is probably in anything you do, you will find yourself at a conference and you need to go be out there and meet people, and in the real estate, that's the conference I'm thinking of, the shopping center real estate conferences. Again, mostly men, and certainly the leaders. And I'm an introvert extrovert. I'm right on the border. So what I did to make myself better at that is I thought about my father-in-law. My father-in-law adores people, loves entertaining people. And so I just told myself, he would stand at the door of this large group of people cocktailing that I needed to walk into. And he would say to himself, oh, this is like being a kid in a candy store. Look at all these people I can meet. This is fantastic. While I'd be quaking in my boots and scared to approach people. And so I just told myself, you know, they're going to be happy to learn about you. And look at all those people you can meet and enjoy. And just kind of tried to shift my own attitude from my natural take on it to someone that I admired.
That's amazing. So the next question comes from Sibel. So how do you decide between expanding to new locations and improving the customer service and current inventory?
So one of the benefits of malls is you have a pretty good sense of how strong the mall is from stats that they have. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll be strong for you, but it's helpful. And for us, our street stores are half of what a mall is in terms of volume. So it's pretty clear that malls work better for us than streets. And that's why we only have about 4 street stores. And improving customer service, well, that's just, it's kind of an ongoing thing. Sometimes we've had mystery shoppers, but that only works so because there tends to be a checklist, and then you don't want customers feeling like a checklist. Like I remember going to Safeway, and the cashier would look at my credit card and then she'd go, "Thank you, Mrs. Flavelle." So, and it didn't feel very genuine. It felt like training. So we like to be genuine. And current inventory, actually, that's a really good question because we have a very tight shelf life. So we make sure that our chocolates, and it depends a little bit on the chocolate. For English toffee, it's about 4 weeks, and for others, it's 6 weeks. And whereas if you were to go to, buy a chocolate bar from a grocery store, it's probably about a year. So chocolate does have a long shelf life, but we want it to be superb when you put it in your mouth. And so we want it to be a much shorter, tighter. And because we control the distribution channel, we can do that. So, so really the shelf life controls the inventory in a lot of ways.
Perfect. So the last question we are going to go to is from Laura Lee. So she's wondering, what is something you wish you would have known before starting your business? And do you have any advice for those who are inclined on starting a business yet don't know where to start? So in your case, what is something you wish you would have known before, I guess, getting involved with Purdy's?
I can't really think of anything, to be honest. I mean, I also had my father as a mentor for certainly a lot of those earlier years. So I was really lucky to not have a partner and yet not be alone. But what I might say about advice for those inclined on starting a business is, have you heard of the podcast called How I Built This? And what I hear repeatedly in those, I listen to them all the time, I love them, is typically it's a frustration that starts a business. So I forget the name of the stroller now, but they didn't feel they could find a stroller that did what they wanted when they had their baby. And so they made a stroller company. And quite often that's where the startups come from, because it sounds like this person is even wondering, like, what product do I start with? Like, what's my business going to be about? So maybe look at, the other one I find fascinating is the dorm room. I think in the US, they have these dorm room kits, which might be different from Canada, I'm not sure, but that must have been someone who was frustrated that they had to go out and collect from all these different stores, all this stuff. And couldn't it be easier? And yeah, let's make a dorm room kit. So look for the frustrations in your life, and that might give you the answer.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So everyone, please join me in thanking Karen for sharing her story with us today. It was truly an honor and a privilege to have been able to host such a distinguished businesswoman. We really appreciate you making the effort to come and talk to youngsters like us. So thank you. I also want to recognize everyone who joined today. These meetings would not be possible without you, so I appreciate all of your support and interest. This is our last Girls Who Start event of the school year, so I just want to congratulate everyone on finishing a successful year. And to those of you who are heading off to college or university in the fall, a happy grad. We know you will do amazing things in your future. So we do have a lot planned for the next school year. So make sure to follow the Girls Who Start Instagram and website to keep updated, and make sure to follow Purdy's on Instagram. I'm just going to link their profile in the chat. They have the most beautiful feed. Thank you so much, Karen. We had such an amazing conversation, and it was truly a pleasure speaking to you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I good luck in your ventures. It would be absolutely fabulous to see businesses emerge from this group of wonderful ladies.
Thank you so much. I hope everybody has the most amazing day. Bye, Karen. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.